And while he is not going to direct the play, it is going to be his successors, the people who still call themselves Jacksonians. They are going to relentlessly gnaw away at the fragile peace that exists between the free states and the slave states until it collapses into war. And it is specifically this moment in U.S. history that has set the stage for the deadliest war we'll ever see as Americans.
Hello and welcome back to The Buck Starts Here, podcast that begrudgingly digs deep into the juicy stories, power plays, and wild twists that shape the presidencies of the United States. My name is Kyle, the George to Eric Mason's Lenny, and today we're still talking about Andrew Jackson, which is just such a great reminder that fame and notoriety, while they may seem similar, they are in fact very, very different.
Wait, who is George and who is Lenny?
I'm just gonna skip over that one. No, I gave you the good one last episode. This is my turn to get a good one.
No, I agree with that. I would say that's a very accurate description. If I'm
when I ran it by Laura, I was explaining it.
Lenny's the big guy, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, we're right. That's a yep.
I feel
that's how Kyle keeps me on the road.
I told Laura this is the episode that's going to be most like that. Like you need the little guy controlling the big guy to keep him from running and punching the wrong person.
His arms are so long.
Oh god!
For everybody who doesn't know, since this is a podcast, I have creepily long arms.
How tall are you?
I'm 6'4", but I have a 6'8" wingspan and no athleticism.
Where the hell were we here? I think we were up to Andrew Jackson's presidency we're getting to. Oh, before we do that though, I do have a message that I was supposed to read you.
Oh, yes.
Laura's sister, Michelle. Okay. She was the one who used to work for the College of William Mary's for many years.
Awesome.
So she said she was listening to the Jefferson Part 1 and she messaged Laura saying that the building that Brian lived in for 6 years before getting his degree was the William Small building. And she'd never put much thought into who that was. And so, she got to make that connection while she was listening. Yeah.
Oh, that is awesome. Yeah.
And she said, it kept going. There's more here, because then we started talking about Wythe, who is the namesake of the William and Mary School of Law. It's one thing to, see that these things are named after colonial lawyers who did this and that, but to make the connection on who influenced, or who they influenced too, is a whole nother level.
Yeah, that is one of the coolest parts about as we journey down this history road is that it explains a lot of stuff, right? Everything got to come from somewhere. Yeah,
so do you have any William and Mary factoids you can drop for her?
Oh God, no! I don't even know. They don't let somebody like me near William and Mary. That's horrible. They probably.
I don't think she made it to Madison yet. I think when she gets there, that's when she's going to find her the loose moral jokes.
Yeah, they really were. It was a weird group of guys. I don't know why they talk so much crap between each other. It's like, you're both elite schools.
Right.
Princeton and William and Mary talking smack is like, what are you guys doing? What are you?
Right.
Bizarre.
All right, so Jackson. On to Jackson. Yeah. What are we doing with him now?
So right now we're at one of the major turning points of U.S. history, U.S. political history right now. And while this show does great efforts to steer away from contemporary politics, and we'll continue to hold that line no matter what president we're talking about, I think it's important for us to take a step back and understand that as we discussed Jackson changed the political landscape, not just through his policy and political maneuvering, but by transitioning or reestablishing, depending on how you want to describe it, a new political party. So much so that it was called the Jackson Party. That's what the early Democratic Party was called. It was called the Jackson Party. And we're going to use that term Jackson Party throughout this episode because, like Kyle and I always talk about, we want to avoid people mistaking, if they hear a clip of this thing, we're talking about, the Democratic Party today, because they're just...
it's not the same.
Yeah, it's 200 years ago. Nothing equates to anything today, right? It doesn't. But I think it is important to note that the Jackson Party would become what the party called the Democratic Party by the time he's done in office. And that should really show just how influential Jackson was. So what I pitched to Kyle for this episode was for us to talk about what that looked like around Jackson himself, right? What are we talking about when we say he formed this new party? what we're really talking about is the rise of Jacksonian democracy, and that's what that term that pops up a lot is. And what is Jacksonian democracy?
Yeah.
Well, really, what Jacksonian democracy is a form of populism. It is.
What do you mean by populism? I've heard you mention that a few times, but can you explain what that means?
So populism can take a few different definitions. Sometimes it means when somebody's like fiscally liberal and socially conservative, but that's not really what populism is today. That's kind of your old Nolan chart definition of populism.
I thought, like, when I hear populism, what I'm thinking of is like the idea that like all democracies fail once like the majority of people realize they can vote for whatever they want.
Yeah, yeah. You're not wrong with that. So sometimes
No?
this is
Okay.
it's perceived that governments eventually become corrupt or out of touch, run by out of touch elites. But what populism does, it's a again, it's an ideology. And what it really does is splits between, you have the idea of the people, the populist, and the elites are like the political elites or the elites of industry. Industry, maybe not right now, but that kind of idea. Interesting enough, you don't really see people talk about like military elites being part of this.
No,
At
not
the
really.
time, kind of funny.
I don't think the military is a way to really get hugely wealthy, though. Not like in Britain when you used to have like privateers and like
Yeah,
where you could actually
and
like capture war loot.
when it was like hard to field a navy because we just kept giving out letters to a lot of people to be pirates.
When they sent you down to Spain back in the old days, you used to keep those parts that you planted a flag.
Jackson's like, that's how we got Spain. I don't see what the problem with that is.
Yeah, shouldn't that be Florida's mine, guys?
Now, populism exists on both sides of the political spectrum, so it's not exclusive to the right or the left. And what the type of populism we're talking about right now is wrapped in with nationalism, just like this type of Jacksonian democracy populism. But it's the idea of passing policies that directly benefit the person today. There are, the show's also about, the economics of the presidents too. Populism,
It's almost kind of short-sighted.
Yeah, it generally doesn't work. There are, I don't know if there's any examples of populism like working in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
Again, just so everybody knows, I'm very Austrian in my view of the economy. So of course you're going to get the Austrians, the polar opposite of populism. So I'm going to be a little, I don't want to say biased, but bias is probably the right word. But I think, I think it's always fair if you disclose your biases to, I think it's okay if as long as I'm telling you that I'm not giving you objective facts.
Yeah.
So, populism at this time, we have this phenomenon in economics called rent seeking. It's when you vote for people who give you things. So I do want to, obviously clarify my economic position on it. And here's another thing. When it comes to economic ideologies, I want to be clear that I don't think there's one right answer when it comes to this. Like, everybody has some good ideas. If I think only all the smart people are in my group, there's something probably wrong with me. I think they call that dogmatic.
Sounds like populism, actually.
That sounds like populism. So yeah, you see the first rise of populism. Voting, voting for direct wealth transfers is a populist ideology.
Mm-hmm.
Not super great for the country in the long term. At least historically speaking, we don't tend to see that to be a successful plan. But this transitions to a weird question that we have, which is, can a populist also defend slavery? That seems counterintuitive.
Wait, I don't know. I'm not sure I'm following what you mean there. Defend as in like keep the institution? Like
keep the institution of slavery.
I mean, what side? Oh man, the population was on that. Is that really what we're saying here?
Well, because the idea becomes that like some of the stealth features of populism, let me use that term, stealth features of populism, is that it's supposed to be you making political actions and laws that allow people to do as they please. Now, that kind of flies a little bit in the face of the Constitution, specifically the Ninth Amendment, which is that like government doesn't need to make rules for people to do what they want. They're entitled to do everything that's not taken away from them through the Ninth Amendment, through the idea of John Locke's natural philosophy.
Right.
Now, I always think one of the best ways to describe, forms of populism is to look at its opposite, which I would argue is Austrianism, which is the idea that economists aren't supposed to be intervening in the economy. What we're supposed to do is man on the spot. You know more about your personal economy than I'll ever know. Yeah, no, we're talking about 1820s populism. And it wasn't really called populism at the time. It was called Jacksonian democracy. And so so everything I described is kind of the opposite, right? It's government passing legislation that benefits people in the short run. And when you are a government and you are saying this will benefit you person, you're kind of doing the opposite of what I described in Austrianism, which is the person dictates what's the best thing for themselves.
Right.
Not the government. And in this wave of Jacksonian democracy, and listen, you read 12 historians, there are 12 different definitions of Jacksonian democracy. And that's okay because there's so many different aspects to it. We could do 12 podcast episodes just on the different views of Jacksonian democracy.
Right.
But for the sake of understanding why we have to discuss Jackson, not just as a president, not just as a senator, not just as a superior court justice, but as a man who kind of changed how we view politics in the United States, I think it's important to understand kind of the very broad idea of populism, which is the idea of of this us versus them, the elites versus the people, which is always ironic because populism requires you to vote somebody to the elites.
Right.
And then think they're not going to do what the elites have done. And they're going to pass legislation to help you. Seems weird. Seems like kind of like, wait a minute. Did we just do this? But it's seen as a common man philosophy, and Jackson is seen as a common man. Which, again, I just find to be very funny because he was running against John Quincy Adams both times. And here's John Quincy Adams, a man who, had a little farm in Quincy. He didn't own any slaves. Was just a very well-learned man who believed in civil service and loved science. It was just kind of like a nerd. It was just a nerd who loved America and loved the idea of the philosophes. And then you have the guy who owns the most slaves in Tennessee. And it's like...
So do you think that maybe some of Jackson's rise to power was some pushback from the previous 6 terms of idealism? Like, do you think it was just too much and maybe the pendulum was swinging at this point?
Yeah, sometimes it's like national fatigue, right? Like you keep... we've had 6 presidents, and you have decisions from the Non-Intercourse Act to the Tariffs of Abomination. You have the Whiskey Rebellion. You have the Yazoo movement. You have
it hasn't been smooth sailing at all. Right? Yeah.
At this point you've had 2 major financial crises. You have the one in the late 1770s. You have one in the 18 teens. The national bank's not really working, but it gets signed back to law.
They canceled. They got rid of it and they brought it back.
And then you got to remember that's pillared between Jefferson, anti-national bank, Jackson, who's going to be very anti-national bank, as we'll learn in the next episode. Yeah, so you end up having these individuals who are working in factories, who are working on, just farm hands, and you have guys working in the Mid-Atlantic who may be working in trade. They're like, wow, I keep hearing all these big political, I read the newspaper and I hear these big political discussions going on in D.C., but how's that helping me? Right. And we're going to talk about some of the policies Jackson passed when he was in there, but important to what caused that switch to the Jackson party was Jackson kind of came up there and said, I'm going to be there for you. I'm not going to be there for the aristocrats. I'm not going to be there for the political elite. I'm different. I'm a general. I took Florida. I saved New Orleans, and I'm now here to save you. And that resonated with people a lot. I mean, Ian will get into it, but Jackson's inauguration his party was so crazy, he had to throw rum out the window to get people to leave.
I was going to ask you about this. Okay. So Laura was doing a little bit of research on this too. She wanted to know if you're going to bring up the inauguration, because from what the research she found was that there was only one person who could confirm that crazy inauguration story. And it also is somebody who apparently really didn't like Jackson to begin with.
Oh, the very famous the cartoon that made the whole event famous, I believe, was written by an opposition newspaper.
Right.
Yeah, no, I thought it was
did that actually happen or no?
I don't know. I've read a couple different accounts that it was pretty rambunctious. Now, did they have to run out the window? I don't think so. I think that's just a euphemism that was used, but I don't think that takes away from the zeal. It was a very, very high energy inauguration. It was nothing like we'd see. Yep. So and that really is the beginning of Jacksonian democracy. Yeah. Now, the discussion, and I brought up this question earlier, is it possible for a populist to also defend the institution of slavery? And this is actually a question that's kind of been, when you read really prominent presidential historians, it's not really a super focused on question, but it's a question that you see pop up a lot. I kind of like everybody has interesting takes on it.
Mhm.
And the weird part about Jackson, he was a populist only for a small group of people, which is essentially white voters.
Yeah.
I would argue that I wouldn't even know it was necessarily, I'd say, landowners in him. But they were the group that made up the voting block. So that's all that really mattered. And that's where populism becomes kind of dangerous because it actually only
Right.
serves the people voting
Right. Right.
for that person. And so anybody who's marginalized on the outside of that, they're just ignored. And so when I started reading, when I saw that kind of question start popping up when I was doing my research, and that was kind of funny because it was like, is he a populist? So yeah, of course he is. I think the idea that Jackson isn't a populist and that those two things were mutually exclusive, I found almost bizarre because all a populist, that's serving your voter base.
Right.
Jackson made no qualms. He vehemently argued that slavery was a right that he had, that it was protected in the Constitution, even though the Constitution was clearly moving towards emancipation with the outlawing of the slave trade in 1808. He viewed it as a right, and he was a merciless slave owner. He routinely broke up families. He had made no qualms about treating them like property. He even referred to them on his taxes just as property. Some people use like enslaved individual. Some people use different terms. He just called them property. It was unlike any other president. You could argue Washington, didn't confront slavery until he was older in life when he was when he married Martha, and the idea, they weren't. You could even argue that he didn't view them as his slaves because they were inherited from Martha.
I almost get the feeling like the slavery issue is just, we'll deal with that another day kind of approach that he took with that.
Yeah, no, I think that is how Washington viewed it. You had John Adams, who was just vehemently opposed to slavery, wrote it in his Constitution. He outlawed slavery and was very like, yeah, it's awesome. We need to outlaw this. Jefferson, all men created equal, who struggled with that question his entire life, answered the question wrong. Madison, who I think privately, if you look at Madison, probably he definitely didn't like the system of slavery, but he was a sick individual. I don't mean sick psychologically. I mean, he had epilepsy and he was frail and he was very sickly despite, living a very long time for a president of his era. And, he was certainly viewed himself as reliant on slave labor, but, you even read like Paul Jennings and some of the other people around Madison, there wasn't this idea of Madison being this arguing that the institution of slavery is a good thing, which is a lot how Jackson viewed it. All the previous presidents viewed it as a horrible thing that's just part of society, or we need to abolish it. Those are everybody's opinion. Even Jefferson, who started with 30 slaves and died with 600.
Right. So it sounds like the population then was, or at least he touched a group that felt underrepresented by the last 6 presidencies then, right?
Oh.
I mean, and I think to answer your question, like, can a populist defend? I think the problem that you have in this type of scenario is that you get a situation put together where everyone's afraid to speak out because now it looks like you're the minority.
Yeah.
They've created a scenario where it looks like slave owners are the majority, right?
Yeah, it's a good way. That's a good way to put it because, nothing's worse when you're in a populist regime than being somebody who's not part of the populace. So Jackson ends up, taking a position different than even Monroe. I think Monroe had one of the most complex views of slavery just because he wasn't aristocratic.
Yeah.
It was just Monroe. And Monroe died, living in New York City, kind of weird in of itself. But you get to Jackson, and Jackson's like, I grew up with nothing. I'm orphaned. I come from nothing. I, bought all this land. I bought all my slaves. Like he viewed it as his right solely because of I think from what he came from. And,
dude, you going to take something away from a guy who's lost everything by 14? Like, good luck.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you have to own other people. I would say
no,
that
but
is,
I mean, I think you have a hard
let
time.
it go easily.
Exactly. I think you have a hard time telling him what he can and can't do, or can and can't have.
Right. Absolutely. So it's weird because we get now, and this is when I talk about setting the seeds for the Civil War that we talked about in the first episode. It's no longer are we emancipation or abolitionism? There's not that anymore.
No, that looks like that's gone.
It's the opposite. It's now we're going to enforce this institution whether you like it or not. I mean, even moving into the 1835 mail crisis, not to get too far into his presidency, but Jackson wanted to burn pro-abolitionist newspapers. He wanted to not allow people to even to read about it. He was in Congress. He endorsed the gag rule.
Yeah.
And he endorsed the gag rule while JQA's up there just being like, screw you guys. And then Jackson gets into this weird thing when he's unlawfully removing Native Americans to make room for slaves. And I'm like, this. Oh, yeah. That was like, when he moved Worcester versus Georgia. Again, not to get too much into his presidency, but Worcester versus Georgia. The Trail of Tears. And he forced Native Americans off their land after Supreme Court sided with Worcester, a.k.a. sided against moving Native Americans off their land. And he was like, he marched down there with his army and said, to Marshall, who was the Supreme Court justice at that time, he's Marshall, come down with his army and stop me.
I do not remember that in the history books at all.
Oh, yeah, that's a weird one. Like, people talk about the Trail of Tears. It's like, that was unconstitutional. The Supreme Court ruled against that.
Wow. So there was no recourse whatsoever from that?
No, and do you know what, Kyle, here's a crazy thing about Andrew Jackson. People, Andrew Jackson's 200 years ago. The War Powers Act is largely because of Andrew Jackson. We saw the United States would see continuous executive creep, especially in the authority of the commander-in-chief, all the way up to Nixon, right? I mean, we're recording this a little while after, after the attacks in Iran, and there's discussions right now about the War Powers Act. Like, you can trace the first seeds of why we had the War Powers Act all the way back to Andrew Jackson, because we saw kind of unrestricted governmental executive creep from Jackson to Nixon. Wow. Like, history's alive today.
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah,
it's wild that it's only gone one direction. Normally things ebb and flow. But
it's funny. One of the shirts I got at the George W. Bush Museum, it's just Article 1 of the Constitution. And we forget Article 1 is the legislative branch. Like the founding fathers wrote Article 1 because the legislative branch comes first. And it's Article 2 and then Article 3. And Article 2 is executive, Article 3 is judicial. And they did that because they wanted a empowered legislator, I should say. But you see this like twist of the Jackson Party being like, we support the institution of slavery, not we need to address this question, like you saw previously, especially the Democratic Republicans. They say we support slavery. Well, the irony of that move is they created their greatest opposition. Because we're not talking about modern parties, for the love of God. I don't want to read like comments. People go, he's talking about the Democratic Party, the Republican Party. No. We're not.
No.
We're not.
Those don't exist yet.
They don't exist yet. And there's a million discussions to have between what they were today, what they were when they were founded. But there would be a movement in the 1850s in Wisconsin to form the Republican Party. And the Republican Party was formed for one goal, the abolition of slavery, because they watched the Dred Scott decision. They watched the Fugitive Slave Act. They watched the unrelenting expansion of slavery that started under Jackson, really started under Jackson. And that formed their opposition. And they inherently formed what would be the downfall of slavery in America, because when you become so radicalized, you force radicalism on the other side historically. That tends to be what happens. Very seldom does it produce centrism.
So do you think that JQA maybe had a little hand in that and creating this climate because of his unrelenting push to force or to confront the issue? Then maybe that's what caused maybe the pushback or the radicalization on the other side.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of abolitionists cite Adams. And it's not just the the Mindy people. It's not just the Armistead case. Like that, like everybody likes that one because it's a nice microcosm of like
also got a happy ending.
Yeah, it's also one of the it's also one of those just like, oh, Adams is amazing. Why would anybody not ever? Why would you not vote for this dude? But no, he kept the gag rule alive, and even it was Abraham Lincoln saw John Quincy Adams be like, hey, I don't care about the gag rule. I don't. So I'm gonna keep talking about this, and that's what's important about this is that they kept talking about it. And it's a very bizarre to see is that you have this expansion of slavery in the United States, prior to the Revolutionary War, and you have this kind of patting down of the slave trade up until 1808 when it ends, and then there's re-expansion of slavery, and then this is just gasoline on the fire after Jackson, and the fire ends up extinguishing itself, and in the course, ameliorates the entire South. I mean, there's parts of the South right now that haven't really recovered from the Civil War. There's counties that were just wiped out of people.
Dude, we salted fields on Sherman's march through some of that.
It became horrific.
When you say that you can see the economic impact on something or something hasn't, what does that mean?
So you can look back at county level data and see all right, you see destruction, right? Anybody who's really interested in this, Richard Hornbeck, I think he was head of history for Harvard, and he's an economist. He's at the University of Chicago, literally one of the best economists alive by a huge margin. So Richard Hornbeck, he's written a bunch of papers, but he writes a cool paper based on land rent values over time. And if you follow that same logical pattern, what you end up seeing is that the county level data is that you expect a war to reduce that price of land, that land rent, how much money you can get from that land, and then it should climb back up over time after the war. Many of those places just never climbed back up. You had counties depopulated from the Civil War from the South. Because the South, similar to the North, they put all the people together. The South put everybody from the same town. It was a militia style. Right. So you have a militia style and somebody runs into a Gatling gun. That town doesn't have any more people.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay.
That's actually how we formed regiments during World War I and World War II was still
learn to split them up from that.
Yeah, because it was cool, we don't have a town in northern Alabama anymore.
Oh, yeah, I could see that being a problem. Okay, that's a fun note to not end on.
Well, we can end on a closing note if I got one for you. Kyle.
Okay.
So the legacy of Jackson is going to go far beyond his presidency. It's going to go far beyond the policies and the populist policies that he's going to push, and we'll talk about the next episode. What really happens with the election of Jackson, with the mythos, however you want to call it, the aura of Jackson rising from this orphan of the Revolutionary War to this successful attorney, successful statesman, successful national statesman, this military general, America's favorite general. What he ends up setting on the plate, and I don't know if Jackson even knew it. I don't think it'd be fair to say Jackson knew this, but what he set the stage for was the Civil War. And while he is not going to direct the play, it is going to be his successors, the people who still call themselves Jacksonians. They are going to relentlessly gnaw away at the fragile peace that exists between the free states and the slave states until it collapses into war. And it is specifically this moment in U.S. history that has set the stage for the deadliest war we'll ever see as Americans.
Well done, Eric, man. That's a heck of a way to bring us to the end of part 2, which also means that we are over the hump. So join us next week. We will continue critiquing the 7th president as we take a look at the other notable events and characters of his era. Is that what we're doing next week?
Yeah, we're going to do his notable characters. We're going to do his presidency.
Okay.
We're going to have fun with that one. That one's going to be, I think we're going to do both at the same time because there's so much that Jackson does. But the most impactful part of Jackson's actually the moment he gets elected.
Yeah. Okay. So while you wait for that, then let us know, are there any of these policies that we've gone through that maybe Jackson had that you agree with? I can't imagine, but if there are...
That'd be wild. Comment section.
I know, right?
Oh my God. I hope not.
The other question I have too is, were we too hard on him or not hard enough?
Yeah.
Really? Because, we've been really hard on him, but have we gone too far, not far enough? I don't know. Let us know, email, comments, however you want to do that. You can do that. You can email us at ChinaShopProductions@gmail.com. You visit the website, buckstartsherepodcast.com. And we'll see you all next week. Produced by China Shop Productions.